Us is a safe space for the panel to discuss various local and global events and provide information on current topics that affect African Americans. Disclaimer: the opinions voiced on this program do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the AFCC, its staff, volunteers, board of directors, or underwriters. I'm Marlo Hatchett, the peer mentor at the center.
And I'm David Whitaker, the project coordinator.
Today, we're going to be discussing the Harlem Renaissance, its impact, and important figures for this time. Would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. So, what was the Harlem Renaissance, right? The Harlem Renaissance was the strategic development of the Harlem neighborhood in New York City as a black cultural mecca in the early 20th century, and subsequent social and artistic explosions that resulted. Later, roughly in the 1910s, during the mid-1930s, the B period is considered the golden age in African American culture, manifesting in literature, music, stage performance, and art.
So why Harlem? The northern Manhattan neighborhood of Harlem was meant to be an upper-class white neighborhood in the 1880s, but rapid overdevelopment led to empty buildings and desperate landlords seeking to fill them. In the early 1900s, a few middle-class black families from another neighborhood known as the Black Bohemia moved to Harlem, and other black families followed. Some white residents initially fought to keep African Americans out of the area, but failing that, many whites eventually fled. Outside factors led to a population boom. From 1910 to 1920, African American populations migrated in large numbers from the south to the north, with prominent figures like W.E.B. Du Bois led to what became known as the Great Migration.
This migration happened because of natural disasters in the South during 1915 and 1916 that black workers and sharecroppers out of work, as well as economic exploitation and violent and pervasive racism. During and after World War I, immigration to the United States fell and the northern recruiters headed south to entice black workers to their companies. By 1920, some 300,000 African Americans from the South had moved north. They relocated to cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit, Philly, and New York. The Harlem section of Manhattan, which covers just 3 square miles, drew nearly 175,000 African Americans, giving the neighborhood the largest concentration of black people in the world. Harlem was one of the most popular destinations for these families because of the need for tenants to fill the buildings. Harlem became a destination for African Americans of all backgrounds, from unskilled laborers to educated middle class. They shared common experiences of slavery, emancipation, and racial oppression, as well as a determination to forge a new identity as a free people.
The Great Migration drew to Harlem some of the greatest minds and brightest talents of the day, an astonishing array of African American artists and scholars. Between the end of World War I and the mid-1930s, they produced one of the most significant eras of cultural expression in the nation's history, the Harlem Renaissance. Yet this cultural explosion also occurred in Cleveland, Los Angeles, and many cities, shaped by the Great Migration. Alan Locke, a Harvard-educated writer, critic, and teacher who became known as the Dean of the Harlem Renaissance, described it as a spiritual coming of age, in which African Americans transformed social disillusionment to race pride. And now we're going to go into the impact of the Harlem Renaissance.
Right.
So the Harlem Renaissance encompassed poetry and prose, painting and sculpture, jazz and swing, opera and dance. What united these diverse art forms was their realistic presentation of what it meant to be black in America, what writer Langston Hughes called an expression of our individual dark-skinned selves, as well as a new militancy in asserting their civil and political rights.
At the height of the movement, Harlem was the epicenter of American culture. The neighborhood bustled with African American owned and run publishing houses and newspapers, companies, music companies, playhouses, nightclubs, and cabarets. The literature, music, and fashion that they created defined culture and cool for blacks and whites alike in America and around the world. However, the Harlem Renaissance's impact on America was indelible. Okay, the movement brought notice to the great works of African American art and inspired and influenced future generations of African American artists and intellectuals. The self-portrait of African American life, identity, and culture that emerged from Harlem was transmitted to the world at large, challenging the racist and disparaging stereotypes of the Jim Crow South. In doing so, it radically defined how people of other races viewed African Americans and understood the African American experience.
Most importantly, the Harlem Renaissance instilled in African Americans across the country a new spirit of self-determination and pride, a new social consciousness, and a new commitment to political activism, all of which would provide the foundation for the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. In doing so, it validated the beliefs of its founders and leaders like Allen Locke and Langston Hughes, that art could be a vehicle to improve the lives of African Americans. So here are a few significant contributors to the Harlem Renaissance. As mentioned before, Allen Leroy Locke is considered the father of the Harlem Renaissance for his publication in 1925 of The New Negro, an anthology of poetry, essays, plays, music, and portraits by white and black artists. Locke is best known as a theorist, critic, and interpreter of African American literature and art.
And then we have Langston Hughes, my personal favorite. If I may, he was a center figure in the Harlem Renaissance, the flowering of the black intellectual, literary, and artistic life that took place in the 1920s in a number of American cities, particularly in Harlem. He was a brilliant writer, poet, and social activist who specialized in what was called jazz poetry, poetry that could be accompanied by jazz music. One of the most recognized works was a poem called Madame and the Minister, which spoke of the mood towards religion in the Harlem Renaissance. Hughes also wrote novels, short stories, essays, and plays. He sought to honestly portray the joys and hardships of the working class black lives, avoiding both sentimental idealization and negative stereotypes. As he wrote in his essay, The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain, we younger Negro artists who create now intend to express our individual dark-skinned selves without fear or shame. If white people are pleased, we are glad. If they are not, it doesn't matter. We know we are beautiful and ugly too.
And then we have Zora Neale Hurston. She was an anthropologist and folklorist who courted controversy through her involvement with a publication called Fire, helmed by white author and Harlem Writers patron Carl Van Vechten, and filled with works from prolific black writers including Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, and Aaron Douglas. The magazine exoticized the lives of Harlem residents. Van Vechten's previous fiction stirred up the interest among whites to visit Harlem and take advantage of the culture and nightlife there. Though Van Vechten's work was condemned by luminaries like Du Bois, it was embraced by Hurston, Hughes, and others. Hurston in 1937 eventually went on to write a novel called Their Eyes Were Watching God, an influential book of the 20th century American literature.
Louis Armstrong, the music that percolated in and then boomed out of Harlem in the 1920s was jazz, often played as speakeasies, offering illegal liquor. Jazz became a great draw for not only Harlem residents, but outside white audiences also. Some of the most celebrated names in American music regularly performed in Harlem: Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Bessie Smith, Fats Waller, and Cab Calloway. Often accompanied by elaborate floor shows, tap dancers like John Bubbles and Bill Bojangles Robinson were also popular.
And the Harlem Renaissance ends as the 1920s came to a close. Its heyday was cut short largely due to the stock market crash in 1929 and resulting in the Great Depression, which hurt African American-owned businesses and publications and made less financial support for the arts available from patrons, foundations, and theatrical organizations. By 1930s, unemployment and municipal neglect had transformed Harlem. The Harlem Renaissance wavered until Prohibition ended in 1933, which meant patrons no longer sought out the illegal alcohol in uptown clubs. By 1935, many pivotal Harlem residents had moved on to seek work. They were replaced by the continuous flow of refugees from the South, many requiring public assistance.
The Harlem Race Riot of 1935 broke out when rumors circulated that police had murdered a black Puerto Rican teenager for stealing a 10-cent pocket knife from a local store. More than 10,000 people took to the streets in Harlem. The protests so soon turned violent and resulted in 3 deaths, 125 arrests, and more than $2 million in property damage. Other economic factors brought changes to Harlem, and many residents moved away from the area.
So that was the end of the Harlem Renaissance. All information was provided by History.com, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and University of Pennsylvania Press. And now we're going to go into some lead updates. So we're going to welcome McKenna Knockham to the panel.
Ooh. Hello and welcome to the lead portion of Soul Sessions Through the Eyes of Us. Welcome back. My name is Dalen. I'm the project coordinator here, and with me I have...
Hi, my name is McKenna Knockham. I am the engagement coordinator for the center.
And today we're going to just give our portion of how tobacco had affected the Harlem Renaissance. Just before we start, LEAD stands for Leadership, Equity, Action, and Development. The goal of the LEAD program is to promote and to protect a tobacco-free lifestyle for all Butte and Yuba County residents who believe passionately in advocating for health equity and environmental justice for low-income people and community.
Our objectives: resisting targeted price promotions. The tobacco industry spends millions of dollars annually on targeting advertising. Low-priced products and coupons contribute to high smoking rates among people of color and low-income communities, and make it easier for youth to become addicted. Number 2, developing upstream approaches to tobacco control. By including tobacco control in general plans and other municipal codes, we protect communities from exposure to tobacco products and help to prevent poor health later in life. We believe limiting exposure to tobacco is an environmental justice issue. Number 3, growing community advocates. We support and empower youth and young adults to fight back against the tobacco industry.
Tobacco today. So, tobacco and tobacco products are more regulated today. Companies have lost countless lawsuits and are now forced to clearly label their products as having a detrimental effect on health of a person. Also, tobacco advertising is severely limited and regulated. Still, tobacco companies make billions of dollars in revenue every year, destroying the health of others. It's estimated that there are around 1 billion tobacco users in the world today. The damage caused by this addiction and its peddlers number in the trillions of dollars of health expenses and environmental damages, emotional damage, and more effort has to be made to educate people, especially teenagers and young adults, about the dangers of smoking.
Okay, so I'm just gonna let you guys know we're gonna do a little timeline of like the history of tobacco, so pay attention to the dates. 1918, an entire generation of young men retires from the war addicted to cigarettes. 1924, over 70 billion of cigarettes are sold in the U.S. 1925, Philip Morris starts marketing to women, tripling the number of female smokers in just 10 years. And this is because in 1920, women were given the right to vote. So they start marketing to women in 1925 because women were starting to have more rights and stuff. So they're like, ooh, let's get them smoking. 1947, I'm probably gonna butcher this, L'Oreal chemist admits that there is enough evidence that smoking can cause cancer. 1950, 50% of the cigarette now consists of the cigarette filter tip. 1967, Surgeon General definitely links smoking to lung cancer and presents evidence that it is causing heart problems. 1970, tobacco manufacturers legally are obliged to print a warning on the labels that smoking is a health hazard.
1970 to 1990, tobacco companies faced with a series of lawsuits. Courts limited their advertising and marketing. 1992, the nicotine patch is introduced. In the following years, more cessation products will start being developed. In 1996, researchers found conclusive evidence that tobacco damages a cancer suppressor gene. In In 1997, Liggett Tobacco Company issues a statement acknowledging that tobacco causes cancer and carries a considerable health risk. In 1997, tobacco companies slammed with major lawsuits ordered to spend billions of dollars on anti-smoking campaigns over the next 25 years, predominantly focused on educating the young on the dangers of smoking. 1997, for the first time in history, a tobacco company CEO admits on trial that cigarettes and related tobacco products cause cancer. His name was Benny LaBelle. And last but not least, 1990 to 2000, bans on public smoking come into effect in most states in America as well as in other countries around the world.
Within this culture, there was little room for opposition to tobacco, except in the privately financed publications of such anti-smoking cranes as the American industrialist Henry Ford and in the hysterical whims of the German leader Adolf Hitler. Although the latter state-sanctioned attack on the people's habit did lead to some pioneering work on the links between smoking and cancer, in 1950 work by the German-born American physician Ernest L. Winder and by the British statisticians Austin Bradford Hill and Sir Richard Dahl provided firm evidence linking lung cancer with smoking. This information came as a considerable shock to smokers, who proved reluctant to give up their habit. Of course, their decisions had already been influenced by physical addiction and advertising and the denials of the tobacco industry. But even after the reports by the Royal College of Physicians in 1962 and the U.S. Surgeon General in 1964, clearly stating the detrimental health effects of smoking, quitting rates were not as high as might have been expected. An average of 2 million people gave up smoking every year in the United States in the decade after 1964. But about half that number also began smoking every year, and not all quitters were able to remain non-smokers. By 1978, the percentage of adults in the United States who smoked had fallen to 33%. A significant majority of those who had quit smoking were professional, affluent men, which made smoking a health problem increased associated with women in poverty. Whereas the average American smoker went through 22 cigarettes a day in 1954. The number has increased to 30 a day by 1978, a statistic that suggested that the quitting rate was higher among those who smoked less, and that the increasing number of smokers who had moved to lighter or filtered brands were smoking more of them.
More recent evidence of the harm done to non-smokers by environmental tobacco smoke has further helped turn attitudes against smoking. Efforts to curtail the individual's liberty to smoke were first most pronounced in the United States, as in California's 1995 ban on smoking in most enclosed spaces of employment, but in 2004, Ireland became the first country to ban smoking in enclosed workspaces, and in other countries have since followed suit. Nevertheless, the strong grip on smoking on the world's most popular culture suggests that the practice will persist. While smoking is increasingly frowned upon in health-conscious age, the smoker has become to feel marginalized and harassed. The very suppression of smoking only increases its power as a symbol of individualism and resistance. For instance, a survey of internationally successful Hollywood films found that motion pictures released in 1995 featured 4 times as much smoking as those released in 1990, with an increase in the number of positive verbal and visual references made to the habit.
These images are being broadcasted to the very areas of the world where American-owned tobacco companies are beginning to make inroads selling their products. All these suggest that smoking is likely to remain as entrenched in the modern global society as it was in a pre-Columbian America.
Mark Twain's famous quote regarding his own smoking habit, estimated to have reached more than 20 cigars per day, which is completely different from a cigarette. Cigars is thick. Might be applied to the complex status of smoking in today's society. To cease smoking is the easiest thing I ever did. I ought to know because I've done it 1,000 times.
that goes to say that smoking is addictive, and he's done it 1,000 times, so that means he keeps continuing the cycle.
All right, now we're going to be moving into talking about some events we have coming up. But first we want to remind you that the opinions that were voiced on this program do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions of the AFCC, its staff, volunteers, board directors, or underwriters. So join us this month of February for Black History Month events. Every Saturday at noon, Black History Today will be featuring speeches and interviews of important figures in our culture on Yo Community Radio, KOY 107.1 FM, and it will be streaming live on KOY.FM. Thursday, February 17th, from 5 to 6:30, the AFCC will be hosting an old-fashioned game night featuring cards, dominoes, chess, and checkers. Food will be served. And then on Saturday, February 19th, from 4 to 7, is our movie night featuring the motion picture Selma. Food will be served as well. And then
the Oroville VSU will be hosting a poetry slam for everyone on February 25th from 5 to 7 p.m. This event will showcase local talent and be providing fundraising opportunities for the students in the Oroville High School gym. Now, I will make a little tiny amendment to this. The location has actually changed from the Oroville High School gym to the Southside Community Center on the 25th of the end of this month, because we will be collaborating with Las Plumas High School and their Black History Month to make one big Black History jam, to end out Black History Month with a bang. So make sure that you're supporting your local high schools, your local Black student unions on the 25th from 5 to 7 with a big poetry slam event at the Southside Oroville Community Center. You're not going to want to miss it.
sounds awesome. And then the next day, on February 26th, the African American Family and Cultural Center is throwing our 3 R's block party. You may be asking yourself, what are the 3 R's? Well, wonder no more. It stands for reclaim, restore, and revitalize, which is why we're reaching out to our community, because it's going to take all of us to make this happen. We will be offering health checkups, resources, a vaccination clinic, as well as music, food, and entertainment. Everyone is welcome, and it's a family affair. There will be activities for the little ones and all ages. What we need from you is to let us know what you would like to see your neighborhood look like. We hope you will join us in creating a better environment for us all. This block party is supported by Vaccinate All 58 and CORE Community Organized Relief Effort.
And then we have our weekly programs, which starts off with Each One Teach One, which is an after-school program for grades 2nd grade through 12th grade, Monday through Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m.
And we got Soul Session Through the Eyes of Us, Tuesdays from 5 to 6.
Behavioral health counselor will be available every Tuesday and Thursday from 1 to 5 p.m.
And then we have Personal Peace Institute, which is our free online program via Zoom that provides participants with the skills and strategies necessary for recognizing and controlling angry feelings. This is a court-approved program. The youth section is Wednesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. and the adults are Wednesdays from 6 to 7 p.m. And then our brotherhood and sisterhood groups are going on a break for the time being. And we'll be introducing a new support group called Parenting for Success. And this is every Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. The class is available in person and online, so mark your calendars and call, email, or walk in to register. The first 5 people to attend 10 classes will receive a gift card.
Mm-hmm. And then we have Dance Diverse, which is a hip-hop and step dance class that allows participants to build relationships, learn leadership skills, and boost confidence. Everyone is welcomed, although there is limited space, so make sure that you get there early. Make sure that you go ahead and sign up and get on there while you can. Fridays from 2:30 to 5 p.m. Fridays from 2:30 to 5 p.m. for Dance Diverse. And then we also have History Right Now featuring yours truly, the thought activist, every Wednesday from 10 a.m. with me, the project coordinator. Make sure that you are listening to 107.1 every Wednesday at 10 for your dose of history right now. Basically, just letting you know how history repeats itself in front of our very eyes, and if we don't pay attention to it, it's just going to keep on happening.
Tune into our community radio station, KOYO 107.1 FM. You can also stream online at koyo.fm. Please give us a call at 530-532-1205, or you can email aafcc@aafcc-orville.org if you are interested in signing up to participate, volunteer, or facilitate any of these programs. Thank you for tuning in to Soul Sessions. We'll see you next week.
Peace.